Hi, HR nerds. This is Nicole Dessain. Welcome to Talent Tales, the show where I interview leaders who have brought design thinking to their talent and HR practices. In today's episode, we have a special guest on the show. I'm joined by Lee Kim, who is the Global Congress Lead PIH and Innovation. That's a mouthful at Pfizer. Welcome, Lee.
Thank you.
Hey. All right. So let's start with what's your story?
Do I start with the whole story or do I start with just part of the story?
Whatever story or part of your story you think is interesting for the audience.
I'll start with the pivoting of a story. As my daughter likes to say, without drama, there is no story. so,
Yeah.
so I was trained as an engineer. I studied mechanical engineering. And then about 7 years ago, I pivoted into design thinking. And with that came a lot of self-reflection on, the way that I have learned, the way that I did things to the way I think I should be practicing. I'm saying way meaning interacting with people, developing business, developing solutions. So throughout that process, I had a great mentor. Her name is Tracy. And, with her help and guidance, I was able to really explore what it is like to be human, what it is. And through the process also, I had lost family. I mean, not like to death or anything like that, but I had lost connection with my parents. And then I reconnected with them. And then now, from working as an engineer for 15 years, working for a global Congress team at Pfizer for almost 5 years now. So that's my story.
Yeah, it's so interesting, connecting back with your human. I think we all could use more of that and be reminded of that. But I have to ask, what is up with these beautiful head creations? And obviously, I benefited from one as well. I'm not quite proficient at wearing it yet, but you are. So, what's the story behind these beautiful creations before we dive into the more serious content?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I wasn't quite sure whether it was obvious I was wearing something, but with you wearing it, I think it becomes more obvious when there's only one of us, then I'm crazy. But when there are two of us, then we're a group. So about 4 years ago, as I mentioned, my mentor Tracy, it was her birthday, and I forgot her birthday, and I felt terrible about it, and I wanted to do something. So as you all know about design thinking, one of the ways that we materialize our ideas into creating prototypes, right? And oftentimes the material we use is pipe cleaners. So
yeah,
a tiny birthday crown for Tracy that day, and I wore it, for a whole day, and that led me to do something for next year, to not forget her birthday, but to remember. Not by the calendar reminders or something written on a post-it. I wanted to really remember it from my memory. So I launched a project called Wearable Tracy, where I create something new every day, and then I wear it from 9 to 5. And if somebody questions, like what you're doing now, like, hey, what is that all about? There must be a story behind it. Then I tell them the story, and then I will connect with that person by asking, thank you for asking, what's your name? And that kind of became a way for me to, not just to remember Tracy's birthday, but also connecting with strangers who I have never met before, who's showing interest in some ways, right? The way that I'm doing things. And now, 4 years later, I'm still doing it because it has evolved into something completely different, where my daughter draws something that she has in mind, and then I will take a look at her drawings and I'll create Wearable Tracy. Sometimes she doesn't have drawings, so I'll just make one and I'll say like, Hannah, what does this remind you of? And she does a drawing. So yeah, that's what the story is about my hat. And it has taught me so many things about people, about me, about assumptions, curiosity, Yeah, all those things, nice things and sometimes scary things.
Yeah, we're getting comments in the chat that people love the head and this, and I get chills every time you tell me the story because I think it's so powerful to create something like that as a conversation starter and to connect with people, that there's so much more behind it than just the head, which is already so beautiful. And then the other thing that I think is really interesting in our jobs, which are so brain heavy, right? And we sit in front of the Zoom all day long, and especially also if when we apply design thinking to HR, um, it's it's sort of something really cool that one could do that's very tactile on a daily basis to just hone our creative skills. So I would challenge everybody to think about what is the equivalent to your wearable Tracy project that each of us could do to sort of hone our creative practice on a daily basis. I just love that as inspiration. Thank you for that. So now I'm curious, because this is already blowing my mind, but I still want to know, what's your creative superpower? And if you have a little sticky note, if you could hold it in the camera, please.
Yeah. So I don't have a little sticky, I have a big.
Yeah, of course you do.
I a cliff and a person, and there's a water. So my creative superpower is actually jumping off the cliff.
I was going to say pushing others off the cliff. So you were jumping off the cliff, okay?
Yeah, I'm not pushing it. I'm not that mean, but I don't know how to swim, by the way. So hopefully this is not that deep.
Got it.
But my superpower or creative superpower is not knowing what's going to happen, but just jump off. I'm lucky enough so far.
So courage, you're being courageous despite not really knowing how deep the water is.
Well, Nicole, you interpreted so much better than what I have drawn.
Well, your drawing is just that good. That's what it is. All right, got it. Well, I think that's such a cool superpower. So I'll be down there catching you. I'm not a very good swimmer, so I don't know how that will work out, but I'll try. Yeah, the two of us will drown together. Well, On that happy note, so let's make the shift to design thinking. So tell us a little bit more about the work you do in bringing design thinking to people practices at Pfizer. I know you're not in HR, which is totally fine. We don't bite. So I'm always interested in having guests from outside of HR, but who also get involved in applying design thinking to people practices. So tell us a little bit about maybe some examples of what you do.
Yeah. So I have been so fortunate when I first joined Pfizer. My manager at the time was actually my student, or part of the design thinking group that was going through executive education. And he asked me to join Pfizer, but he knew at that time that there was no practice established for design thinking only. And I think many firms have that, but he wanted to bring this thought process inside of his group, which was Global Congress team, and at least empower that group. And to be honest, I didn't know what Global Congress was at that time. I thought Congress had something to do with political organizations. So I'm going to be going in and working with Republicans and Democrats. And of course, I was wrong. Congress is large conferences. And if you are from Europe, you probably know that. But I was ignorant. But actually, it's a very interesting channel because that's one of the marketing channels. You can actually meet people at a space and interact with people. So when I first joined, one of the most memorable project that I led is called International Association for Geriatrics and Gerontologists. And we had to design an exhibit. And it was already fully designed with different marketing channels, putting their brandings and things like that. The way that I brought in design thinking was I got on the call and we were all ready to check off the boxes on what is done and what to be done next. And my colleague at that time, she introduced me to the team and said, Lee is not from pharma and she's not from marketing, but she has experience in design thinking. And I would like you to hear her thoughts and see if we can make it better. So I shared the idea about my friend who is an architect in college and how she influenced me, where I was asking her a question, what is architect? What do you do? I don't see you building any models. And she told me that architecture is not about building buildings. It's not about, chiseling out the things and making forms. It's actually understanding people. It's understanding who is going to be in the neighborhood, in the surrounding areas, who is going to go inside of the room, and is coming from understanding what they're going to experience makes a good architect. And she was 19, 20 years ago, but it just really touched me, so much so that I remember that story. And so I asked people, before we go out and finalize the designs, can we remove ourselves from the room, from the structure, and really think about who is coming into the space? What are they going to feel as they're going through it? What are they going to think about as you take a look at the whole surroundings? And I think we should start from there.
So really putting yourself in the shoes of the audience.
Yeah. And I think that's how we began to change the dialogue. It was not about, hey, let's build a workshop and let's go through this and then, come up with prototypes. It started with a conversation about what we are designing is not a branding or structure. We are designing human experience. And it starts from really thinking about the people who are going to be occupying space, experiencing things. And that doesn't come from our marketing message, although you're going to weave those things through, right? But I think if we can make the connection with people from the very beginning, the messaging is not going to be strong because people will forget. But if we remember who they are and design for them, then it will be more powerful. So that is the most memorable experience I had from the very beginning of my career at Pfizer. And so when we design things, not just for the exhibit, but also with other things.
Aren't you doing something around leadership, for example?
Oh, leadership, I think people are always interested in creating alignment. And it's not leadership is not about telling people what you want them to do. It's understanding each other and creating the alignment. So opportunities come many times in different forms. And one of the things that I do is if people are interested in creating visions and strategies, then I'll go and talk to the leaders and then understand what their needs are, and then create mostly workshops around those alignment. But I also like to make sure that the workshop does not end up as just a workshop. So having kind of follow-throughs to make sure that, okay, so we have done this for that 2 days. What are we going to do to make sure that it's not just a team building exercise, but it is actually changing cultures? So in a small way, I don't think I'm changing the culture in a larger way, but little by little, just having a conversation, understanding where people are coming from, and pushing the boundaries from inside and also from outside as well. That, having a conversation with you, learning about how others are doing, those things are really important as well.
Great. So I have a few more questions, but also to the audience, if you want to put your questions in the chat and we'll get to them in a little bit. So what were the barriers that you encountered in bringing a human-centered design approach into the organization, and how did you overcome it?
Any kind of new initiative, I think you will have barrier because people have preconceived notion or their usual way of doing things. And then now you're coming in here and there's, another month flavor. Last year it was this year is this. So I think a barrier is that people think it's just one of the fad, right? And people have gone through those kind of things. So instead of having it as a workshop or some kind of initiatives, if we can make sure that is a practice that we do as a team, from the very beginning of your strategy session. Let's think about these kind of things and make sure that are you talking to your customers? Have we heard from them? Do you have any way of connecting back with them? Have we thought about those? And actually share, even sometimes you go out and do research and then bring it back to those voice of customers and share those things and make it not as just a one time, but as a consistent approach to help them to understand them better. Because it's not, I don't think anybody wants to do things worse, right? They are doing their best to deliver the best results possible. And so far, this is what they are comfortable with. This is what they have learned. So I don't think we should discount that. Respect those things at the same time, asking them, would you mind taking a look at it this way? Can we also try this? So kind of this experimental mindset that we all talk about. I'm not asking you to, spend this much time and this much money. Can we just do a test run on this? Can we just to see what our customer says? We don't have to do, 100 people interviews, but can we at least speak to 6 people and get their voices? And then I think when they hear the voices of customers, then the perception change because their assumptions are oftentimes not what the customer says, right? So I don't think I'm doing it any differently or breakthrough kind of way, but I'm doing it the way that I think that people can relate to. Hopefully they also feel empowered along the way. They see the change in doing the things, not big ways, but smaller ways in making changes.
Yeah, I love that aspect of the mindset and design thinking. We say it's methods and mindset, so that you focus on that. And then the other thing that you said, and you work mostly with external audiences, but also internal, I think, when you say once people talk to customers, their mind changes. And I see the same when we apply design thinking to HR. And oftentimes I get feedback when we do research interviews with employees and HR professionals tell me, well, this is actually the first time I've talked to an employee or a leader about this, and the responses to that usually blow their minds. It's because we have been trained in our function to be the experts and the designers of workplace programs. That's how historically it's gone. And now to shift to that mindset of, I'm going to co-create with our employees is usually a huge aha moment. So I love that's so applicable across, doesn't matter who your customer is, right? That notion or that practice of let's talk to them, let's try to put ourselves in their shoes and let's co-create. That's sort of the theme, no matter your audience, right?
Yeah. I mean, I did one of the project with HR. I don't work with HR that much, but because there are people who reach out and ask for assistance in what they're trying to do. One of the things that I did was actually onboarding of colleagues during COVID, just a project, and I suggested interviews with them. And throughout the process, one of the participants actually said, one of the things that really surprised me was X. And the X was asking whether we could do some strategy sessions, and it was just a comment. And so when I do an empathy interview, I don't want empathy interview to be just an insight gathering if I can actually offer help. And if the person is asking for, I would like to explore this, I want that to be part of output for the interviewee as well. So this is kind of different than just conducting empathy interviews with our customers. Because these customers are our colleagues, I actually can help if they want. So afterwards, I actually engage with the person to host, vision setting exercise and strategy sessions. And we're still going on with that kind of initial interview that happened last year in June. So that is a little bit different than just how are we applying our empathy interviews and our prototypes and our design thinking skills to change HR function. If you are an HR function person with a design thinking mindset, I think you can actually do a lot more than just the solving for the problem that you initially started to do. You can actually create a side project. And of course, that has to, think about your time commitment and things. But that's actually where I get more excited about. That is, oh, yes, I would love to help the onboarding process, and those interviews are great. But what I get really excited about is what is the real need that this person has that goes beyond the onboarding. And if we can also help with that, then you get buy-in from that person.
I love that so much. So, instead of just mindlessly applying our methods, like let's get through 10 empathy interviews and see what comes out, you're actually connecting. It goes back to your human connection, right? You're connecting with the human, and you're identifying what you as a person can do, not just you, let's say an HR professional as the HR function structurally, but as an individual, as a coworker, as a colleague, from human to human. I love that.
Yeah.
That's really, really cool. So what's the impact you've noticed after having introduced human-centered design to your organization?
Well, most of the times the conversation change. So before, let's say, oh, hey, we have to implement, this new services and that new services for our Congress channel. What we are first saying is we have spoken to healthcare professionals. Here is what we have designed. And then this is what our solution is. So I think the first question changed. Have you talked to, have you spoken to, have you observed healthcare professionals? That's the biggest impact, of course, because you can create solutions many times over. But if you can actually have people to think about, we are not creating solutions for us, we're creating solutions for those who are going through the experience, and questioning ourselves and say, like, how do we know that this is what people really look for? Have we spoken to the users? Have we really cared for their journey? And I think that conversation change within our group is a huge win for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I have a couple more questions, but if the audience has others, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them momentarily. So what's your favorite design thinking resource or hack?
Favorite resource? I'm not a very good reader.
Well, it can be a hack.
I'm jumping off. My favorite design thinking hack is LinkedIn. So whenever I have an idea, whenever I have an idea and I want to kind of test out the ideas, you will see it, Nicole, now that you are on my LinkedIn connection. I'll put a call out into the world and I say, hey, I'm designing an ideation session. Can you come and help and share your ideas? We are gonna design a test session. Can you come and help? And without fail, have at least 3, 4, because we don't need giant number of people to join. So my design thinking hack is use whatever the platform you can to actually practice that fast iteration. Because I personally cannot wait for 3 months for some ideas to be tested out. I need to ideation today. I need to test it out this weekend, and I need to refine it next week. And I cannot wait for my team to be ready. So, and I also want to add value to the community, right? So LinkedIn community has been a huge plus in my life because I hope by coming to my ideation sessions, they can be part of the community. By coming and testing out the sessions I design, they can learn something that I haven't known or they haven't learned as well. So what I offer and what they can take can be, give and take relationship, or something more of a fulfilling afterwards. So that's my big design thinking hack, that use whatever the platform have to do fast iteration, learn from each other. And by doing so, you actually create bigger community of people who are willing to help each other. And then now they become your resources and I become their resources.
I love that so much, because sometimes I think a myth is that design thinking has to be costly, or we need to spend a lot of money, or it's time consuming. And so this is sort of a very simple, elegant hack. It's cheap. People are already on their platform, and it's quick, right? So I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
All right. So at the end, I share a quote and let you react to it. Are you ready?
Ooh,
All right.
that was my
Quote, the secret of genius is to carry the spirit of the child into old age, which means never losing your enthusiasm, unquote. Aldous Huxley.
oh, that was so beautiful. It was so beautiful, Nicole, because I grew up in a countryside in South Korea where there was no technology until I was in third grade. So I really experienced the beauty of pure childhood play and memory, where I run into the mountains, um, hunt for insects and things like that. And sometimes I wonder if I have lost that curiosity and wonder in the nature that I was able to discover the frogs and tadpoles and grasshoppers and centipedes. Because there are so many things that I have learned from that early age than the books that I listen to now, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because now we do the audiobooks. And so, yes, if the genius is someone who can find things, who can find wonders in the world, I definitely believe that those moments in childhood, if I can carry that forward with wherever I go and just to ponder a little bit more.
Well, from where I sit, I think you got it. To me, you're the embodiment of that, actually. So,
Thank you.
beautiful. All right, we got a few questions from the audience. So, Brand is asking, what are your recommendations to introduce design thinking to an organization that has no experience with using it?
Um, so when I came to Pfizer, the group that I was in, they didn't use design thinking. And so I think it is necessary or helpful to go through a little bit of experience in design thinking. You know, it doesn't have to be, 5 days of design thinking training, but sharing stories and maybe just have a little bit of experience in creating something meaningful for their group, even if it's just like, can we create our weekly meeting applying design thinking? And of course you will have stories to share, but if we can do a simple things like that, they see the power. I think until they do theirs, they don't see the power. It's
Mm-hmm.
somebody else's story, right? But once you see they're listening to the voices of customers, designing something, do a quick iteration. Once they see the power, then they're like, oh, how do I do this more? Because the worst thing you can do is just to push it out to everyone without having people understand why they should do it. I've seen so many voluntold cases. So if people can experience something even small and then have them to actually ask for it rather than doing it just company wide design thinking from day one to everyone. I would go little slow, but small, and then you can do the people talking, experiencing things that goes fast, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think I personally experienced it first before I learned all the things that comes with it. Whether it's a large organization or even just a small school system, I think that works well for me. Hopefully it works well for you too, Brent.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of good comments in the feedback that really resonates. And then, so to that point, that's what I usually also say. It's like, let's start with you. What's your own practice that you can hone? Then what is sort of the small hack you can bring to your team, to your point, to your next team meeting? What can you try there? And then from there, sort of, and I hear that from other people I interview, and then they're like, it spreads. People say, hey, can you do this again that you did the other day? They don't necessarily know it's design thinking. And sometimes it's better
Yeah.
not even to call it that, right? But to your earlier point, to just say, hey, what's your problem? And are you maybe open to trying something different or new here, right? And then applying
Yeah.
it there. So, yeah. So on that note, we are at the end of our time. I could talk to you forever.
Oh my God.
So thank you so much for this soup. I'm so inspired. I will walk very inspired into the rest of my day. And I'm sure everybody else is as well. Thank you, everybody else, for joining us, and see you at a future Talent Tales. And this
Thank
is
you so much.
Lee's representation of our show today. Beautiful. Make sure you catch the video, everybody, because this is something for the eyes. Bye.